My closest surf fishing network, I'd say, is 4 guys. There's like a 5th floater out there.
That's like a whole stadium worth.
What do you think's a good size? 3 people?
One.
Yourself. Okay. He doesn't share with anybody. All right, welcome back, everybody. It is week 15. I got Liam O'Neill here with us this week. He's been our producer for the past 15 weeks of these, 14 weeks of these. And Jim Fee, who sat in for me last week when I was, plagued with some sort of lung disease that I feel like I contracted from you.
And as you can see, I'm in my summer plumage. I've shed my spring flannels and hoodies. And that's a sign that the migration's winding down.
Yeah, it is. It's our final report of the 2026 spring migration. As you might expect, there's not a ton of new things to talk about, but we do have a quick kind of abbreviated coastal rundown that we'll get through, and we've got a guest report from a familiar face in Maine this week. And then to wrap it up, we'll kind of have a roundtable discussion here with Jimmy and Liam before we send it off to the offshore reports, which are kicking off this week as well.
Striper, the surf, the spring run's my favorite part of the year, but then tuna fishing coming up, also very exciting. So we'll see. There's already some good rumblings to the south and some giants up here. So we'll talk about that with me and Anthony. See that starting this week as well.
So before we get into our quick coastal rundown here, a quick thank you to our sponsors, Z-Man, Garmin, Grundens, Quantum, Yozuri, and Cobia Boats.
And we also want to thank the people at Fleer, Smith Optics, Seakeeper Ride, Melt and Tackle, and Canyon Runner.
Kind of our coastal rundown, what we've done, Johnny, the past 14 weeks is we've actually hit every area and talked a little bit about what's going on in that region. And at this point, it's just there are stripers across the entire coast. You've got kind of, you got your fish down off of Maryland, New Jersey, New York. They're going to be, summering off the beaches there, people catching them on sand fleas, things like that. A lot of fish in the inlets still. There was some upwelling recently in New Jersey that caused the water temperatures to drop a lot. So I think a lot of the fish that were maybe in the back bays are finding some cooler ocean water in the inlets and stuff now. And then, out by Montauk and the Eastern Sound, you're kind of starting to see the summer, fishery develop. And then further north of there, we've still got some fish movement, fish coming in and out of the rips around Cape Cod, moving on to deeper rock and reef structure, kind of, from the Long Island Sound, I would say north of there. And then, Maine's still going to have trickles of fish coming in. We've got a full moon, I think, at the end of this month, right? On the 29th.
29th,
yep. So there's still a lot to look forward to, but it's been a bit of a roller coaster this year. The migration in general was a slow start. Excitement built, and finally water temps kind of caught up to what the calendar date was. And a lot of areas had some lengthy, slow periods of fishing, the Cape being one of them. I think we can all agree that there was some times here where we were like, where is our next wave of fish? But then a push of bass would arrive and the local action would improve for a couple weeks. And then, so we're really seeing hot spots of action, I think, kind of up and down the coast throughout the course of the migration. But like I said, now you got stripers settling into kind of more predictable areas and patterns from the Mid-Atlantic up into the New England area. They're widespread, and they will be until kind of late August, early September when we start to see those fish slide back south. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves though, because I don't want to think about the fall migration just yet. But currently, we got summer resident fish, like I said, hanging along the beaches and inlets from Maryland up to Long Island. Further north, Long Island Sound and beyond. You got the summer transition kind of beginning. We're seeing a lot of bass hanging in cooler, deeper water over reef and rock structure in New England from kind of Block Island to Boston. Some smaller pockets of fish still roving around and settling into the rips off Cape Cod. And then for our friends a bit further north, I would say from like Cape Ann to New Hampshire and Maine, you're still getting your migratory waves of fish. The frequency of those fresh arrivals is kind of beginning to drop off as fish, kind of just set up in some more comfortable areas as they move on up the coast. But like we said, we got a full moon. There's still a little bit to look forward to. If you're north of Massachusetts, you got bass still chasing herring and alewives in the rivers. The true open water season, as we'll hear from our guest in a few minutes, has not really begun yet. It's still kind of taking shape, which brings us to our guest report this week. He's the author of our Coastal Maine Fishing Planner in the magazine, the owner and guide at Diamond Pass Outfitters in South Portland, Maine. Here's Captain Lou Tirado with a migration update from Vacationland.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Johnny. This is Lou from Diamond Pass Outfitters. Thanks for having me on again, guys. I really appreciate it. Love talking to you and everything. Yeah, man, things are going good up here in Maine. We're right in full swing. It's coming off the June new moon, and tides were good for early morning bites. The fish were happy. But overall, the season's been pretty good. I mean, it started off, right on time, right around Mother's Day. We started getting some fish up in the rivers, right around the herring runs and stuff like that. But it's big fish, dude. Like, our average size fish that we're seeing, there's, I'm going to say 15 to 20 pounds, like those 35 to 45 inch fish right now, which is a little crazy. It's definitely against the grain of what we're used to seeing early in the season. But I think, talking from guys up and down the coast, that's just what we're seeing right now for that stock. It's that 2015 year class. It's the predominant class going on with not a lot behind it. I am happy to say, though, that we did see some smaller fish the last few days. When I say smaller, I'm talking 24 to 27 inch fish. Not a ton, but some moved in that were fresh with lice on them, so that was exciting to see. Yeah, man, up here, the predominant bait right now that we still have going on is alewives and river herring in the rivers. We had a bunch of Brit herring move in off our river mouths and off the beaches, which has brought in a lot of mackerel, which is fun. And sand eels. And then obviously up in the flats, we've got our green crabs, which never leave. The fish are on those pretty heavy, and sand eels, and then the shrimp as well. As far as what we've been using, man, it's been a whole laundry list of stuff that we've been chucking, just trying to have fun with it. Predominantly, we're starting the mornings out with soft plastics, this Albie Snack, the XL, in bone. I just did a little fix-a-lure on that to repair it. And then for top water stuff, it's the Yozeri Hydro Pencil here. That's been cast well, makes a good knocking sound. For glide baits, obviously, on the water, guys, we're all about the glides. We got this Nessie that's been working pretty good. Real super easy, user friendly here by Berkeley. It's a soft glide bait, which is fun to use. And then the Tactical Anglers one that we've been throwing, their new one, has been getting some good strikes. I don't know if you guys noticed, though, there's a color, pattern here for me. And our water's a little tannic and stuff up in the river, so this bone really seems to shine through, and the fish can find it pretty easy. Yeah, man. And then for the flies, if we're in the rivers, we're throwing these here, just simple deceiver patterns. And then up on the flats, old trusty, the Krauser, which is tied by the local guy Joe Webster up here. These things, it's just a Krauser crab hybrid, man. These things, you drag them nice and slow on the bottom, make the sand puff. The fish, they just inhale it, dude. Small fish, big fish, they crush these things. So get you guys some Krausers if you're fishing crabs, regardless of where you're at. I'm looking forward to the rest of the year, dude. Honestly, guys, I think things are shaping up. We're seeing more and more pushes of fresh fish. There seems to be plenty of bait. I've heard some rumblings of some small bluefish running around. I haven't seen it personally, but I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, I think, we're just going to keep seeing the class of this 2015 here, these 35 to 45 inch fish are going to be the big deal. And that's what we're looking for. Should be good for the rest of the year. As always, thank you guys. I appreciate it, and I'll talk to you soon. See you.
All right, thank you, Captain Lou, for the report from up north. If you are planning a summer striper trip to Maine and looking for a guide, Lou's one of your guys, definitely give him a shout. Ask about his availability. And what I want to do is kind of segue Lou's report into our tackle tip of the week from Melton Tackle, where we get all things striped bass gear conveniently in one place. My tackle tip of the week this week and for the rest of kind of the summer season, I guess you could say, is going to be pick up a heavier striper stick. You got a lot of, as Lou mentioned, bigger 15 to 20 pound fish kind of showing up early. And now, obviously the cows are coming home up in Maine. So you got a lot of bigger fish, still plenty of cooler water up there. But for the resident fish that are going to be further south, we're heading into the summer months. Water temps are climbing into the 70s and up. And limiting fight time is really important to releasing those under and over slot fish in good condition. So whether you need a new combo, a real replacement in the middle of the season, or just a stiffer rod to kind of horse in those bigger fish, Melton Tackle's got you covered. Lock down those drags, opt for a heavier than average rod to avoid playing fish to exhaustion whenever possible. Something that I think happens in the rips quite a bit in the summer is people use tackle that's too light, just because the size class of the fish may not be 40 plus inches, but you've got heavy current, and that's what's going to keep those fish fighting to exhaustion. So those 10 to 15 pounders are equally important to the future of the fishery as the 40s and 50s. So if you're in need of a beefed up rod or more a more powerful reel, whether it be spinning or conventional, head to mountaintackle.com. You can shop by species and prepare for the summer striper season ahead. So the theme this year has kind of been that everything happened a bit later than usual due to the colder than average spring water temps and what seemed like a longer spawning season in the Chesapeake. I think we can all agree that we were wondering when the fish are going to kind of drop out, but that usually means it's a better spawn when the fish take a little bit more time in the rivers and they got the colder water from the winter. So clearly that's holding true in Maine too. They've got some kind of cool water temperatures up there. Excuse me. I was just also reading Lou's Maine fishing planner in the June magazine, and he mentions that usually by like mid-June, the bass have started dropping out of the rivers to set up on the bays and in the bays rather, and along the beach fronts. And we know it's been a great year for river herring, so that's kind of keeping some fish in the rivers longer than expected. He also mentioned Brit herring, which are those juvenile sea herring outside the river mouths, and along with sand eels and mackerel. So the mackerel are feeding on those smaller baits. Bass are just starting to drop out and feed on some of those smaller bait and on the mackerel. And with all that smaller bait, it's a light tackle and fly fisherman's paradise in Maine right now. So I was pretty intrigued by Lou's report. Johnny, you and I were talking about it before.
The Crouser
fly, which is a hybrid Clouser minnow and crab pattern, which is it seems like pretty unique to Maine with the sight fishing they have going on, with the green crabs. That's a big thing up there on the mud flats. So I might have to grab some of those for my summer fluking, actually. Ooh. Seems like it would be a good thing to do. A few obvious observations from the spring migration. We'll kind of go around here and see if everybody kind of agrees or if anybody has their own observations they'd like to chime in with. But mine are, obviously schoolies pretty much MIA. We're not really seeing many of them around in general. It seems like the Long Island Sound right now has some, and it seems like maybe those were Hudson fish that kind of dropped out and they're kind of sticking close to home. But other than that, man, I encountered maybe a handful. I could count on probably two hands of how many 20-inch fish I caught this season.
I was going to say, that's the only fish I've caught on the fly were the schoolie ones. And there was maybe one just above schoolie that we caught in the beginning of the year when I was fishing in Rhode Island. Yeah. But other than that, it was that slot sized and up.
Yeah, and that's been echoed by all of the people we've had, charter captains and guides that have kind of chimed in over the weeks, Johnny. We're seeing the results of the kind of the poor spawns from the past 7 to 8 years. I don't know about you guys, but I didn't have any fish in the predictable very early spring areas that I normally do. The worm hatch bite did not happen for me. Typically, you can expect to see kind of those 20 to 30-inch fish at most in the backwaters, hitting small top waters like the top knot pencil and the jumping minnow and stuff like that. And I just had none of that this year.
That's going to be one of the major changes we see is there's fewer schoolies over the next few years, where the places where you traditionally find them, you'd go deep into bays, into little creeks and rivers, and they would be just chock full of schoolies eating grass shrimp, eating crabs. I mean, as bass get bigger, their habits change. What they need to eat to fuel that bigger engine changes. So it takes a lot of cinder worms to fuel a 40-inch striped bass. It happens. Guys do it. I know guys who have caught 40-inch bass on worm hatches, on the worm spawns, but it's really rare. Generally it's going to be 18 to 28 inches for the most part. And once the fish seem to hit 30 inches, you see them, they still go into the backwater areas, but not quite as deep.
Right.
And they just kind of change how they act. This year you saw big fish being caught earlier on in the surf, in the open surf down in New Jersey and Long Island. They had a great run of good bass out front at a time when normally most guys would be still looking for smaller fish in the backwaters.
Right.
So the big fish run was a little bit accelerated while, like you said, you just weren't finding those smaller bass. I caught my first fish of the year locally was 28 inches. I think I've caught maybe 5 or 6 fish below 28 inches this year.
Yeah.
And, I'm not saying that as a flex. It's just kind of it's usually hard to find that few fish that size. You know? And I'm not doing anything differently than I've done over the last 20 years of, 18 years of fishing Cape Cod. So that's a population issue.
Yeah.
That there's fewer schoolies. I mean, normally I mean, the number of fish I've caught overall is substantially down because you don't have the bulk of those 20 to 28 inchers that you catch and kind of claim as a nuisance.
Well, so one of the things you mentioned, Jimmy, is like, and it's like this year I didn't see any of it, like 30-inch fish plus in the backwaters on those cinderworm spawns. But 2 years ago, we had here in Falmouth a fish kill that was, I think they deemed it was based on like, it was just all these 30-inchers had gorged themselves on worms, so much so that the worms were like up in their gills and the bass were choking to death basically because they ate so many of these things. So it's like that doesn't seem to be happening anymore because those fish are now in, like a 40-inch class. That was 2-3 years ago at this point. So
yeah, it was a different year in terms of banter herring run, which in Narragansett there was a great herring run, Merrimack River, unbelievable herring run, a lot of the South Shore runs. And that's going to change how the fish move. If there's that many river herring coming in, that's going to direct where the fish go. So they won't have to find alternative sources of food, like the grass shrimp or the cinder worms. Then you have the squid come in around early June. So it's been, in addition to the population dynamics, it's been a different year in terms of the bait.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's what made it a kind of unique season, I think, overall. But, sometimes frustrating.
Yeah. Johnny, you had something to say about the herring runs and stuff? Or
No, not even. I just want to jump back. We're all kind of doom and gloom right now. We're talking about the awesome big fish in and up, but I love that like first few weeks throwing small plastic, small top waters, throwing the pin because you might lug into a weak fish, catching those little 18 to 24-inch bass, and we just didn't get to do that this year.
Yeah, it's like a rite of passage to the striper season. And
that's how I caught my first ever striper. I still go to the same spot where I did that. It's kind of like a nostalgia thing for me, and it just didn't happen.
Yeah, aside from, I would say, like my very early season, like when we first got our first wave of migratory fish, the herring runs were just stacked around here on Cape Cod, and that's where all the fish seemed to make a beeline to.
Right.
But they didn't really hang out there very long. And to kind of piggyback off what you said, Jimmy, it was a banner year for alewives, but another one of my big observations this year has just been, and not only here around Cape Cod, but just the coast in general, is like the lack of bunker. That seems to be one of the driving factors that bass will kind of follow them up the coast in a way. But this year we had kind of fish just beeline for a lot of the herring runs. And even though the water temps were not where they typically would be for, like, let's say early May, you had fish racing up the coast and like seeking out those herring runs from Narragansett Bay to Cape Cod to the South Shore of Massachusetts. It was a great year for bass on like alewives and whatnot, and we're still seeing that up in Maine right now.
Last week, Jim and I graded all the bait fish. What do we give bunker? A C minus?
I think so.
Yeah,
because there were places where it's good. It was good in the Western Sound. It's pretty good in Connecticut right now. There seems to be more bunker moving in. And talking to some folks, I was talking to somebody from the DMF, and he said there's plenty of bunker offshore. Mm-hmm. He said they're seeing bunker out on like Jeffries. So. The bunker are there. They're in deep water. They just haven't come in, and they will eventually. Yeah. At some point, they will move in, and usually, even on years where they're sparse, you can count on this back half of June to see them come to some of the Cape harbors, especially around Buzzards Bay. I haven't been out looking yet, but I mean, no matter what, that's reliable. One of the most reliable things we had, because Kevin Blankoff and some guys from Old Town would always like pinpoint these next few days to go on kayak fish up there, and they would get bunker and live line them. And usually there'd be some good fish on them, but those 30 to 38 inchers, and then maybe a shot at one over 40 inches.
Yeah, and another thing about the bunker this year is, and I'm hearing it from guys down in Long Island Sound and sort of up here in the Boston area as well, is that the bunker have been like 5 to 8 inch bunker, like the kind of not the full size bunker that you'd expect. So like, I know Jack Larizzato went out on a chunking trip recently in Long Island Sound. He's gone on a couple, I think, this year with the angler fleet out of Port Washington. And what he said was, the bunker we're using to chunk, usually a full-grown bunker, you get, 3 solid chunks out of the head and maybe 2 body parts, and then get rid of the tail. But you're chunking, you get maybe 2 chunk baits out of one of these like 8-inch bunkers. So
I found one bunker school in Narragansett Bay when I was fishing. We were just, at this point, we had our fill with, where we were fishing. We were just trying to find some new spots and stumbled on a bunker school, but was not that big. Yeah. And there were a lot of boats around it trying to get their fill, trying to live line. But also, again, like that, I would say biggest was 7 inches.
Yeah.
Like not big whatsoever. from what I saw, and there weren't really any bass around it.
Which is strange because the past few years, it feels like the big bunker have been driving that big fish bite. All the big fish hotspots have sort of been bunker areas.
Yeah.
They're just not around yet.
Yeah. Well, so on a little bit of a lighter note, I'd like to kind of transition into not only what are some of our observations about, the size class of fish and bait, but what are some of the highlights of your seasons? We can kind of go around the table here. And Jimmy, if you want to start, if you have any like major highlights that you'd like to kind of just touch on.
Can I go last?
Sure, you can go last. I'll go first. All right. So one of my highlights this year was being able to kind of spend more time chasing stripers in the rips on the cobia, on the 245cc that we had at our disposal, and it was exciting because we didn't have it very close to where the rips actually are. We had it up in Pecasset, which is Upper Buzzards Bay, if you're not familiar with the Cape. But running from Pecasset to Martha's Vineyard and beyond, and then back was a long run. But being able to do that when we wanted to was a lot different because I don't get to fish the rips. I mean, we're all pretty much for the most part surf guys. Liam, you get on boats pretty often, but the rest of us here we're pretty much shore guys for the most part. And the Seakeeper ride was a game changer for those long runs to and from the basically Martha's Vineyard and then Upper Buzzards Bay. That was just, it was so nice to have that because a lot of the times we'd end up running back north and we'd have the wind shift from southwest or south to northwest or northeast, which doesn't happen a lot during the spring, and you'd get your teeth kicked in if you didn't have that Seakeeper ride. So
You spent a little bit more time on the cobia than I did this year, Matt. How were the trips on the cobia?
They were pretty good for the most part. We started with we had to go out to the rips to film something, and we got a couple fish on like paddle tails when the fish weren't showing up top. And then as the fish kind of got more aggressive, the water temps warmed up a little bit more. The squid filled into the rips as that kind of bite died in Nantucket Sound. The squid bite died in Nantucket Sound, and then we started getting them on top on the Z-Mans and stuff like that, and even on some poppers and whatnot. So that's when that was exciting for me because, like I said, I don't get to experience that very often.
Who had the biggest fish on the cobia? And we had it for a few weeks. Was it?
I think it was Kevin.
Kevin.
Kevin, 44 incher. Yeah.
That's a good segue, actually. Excuse me. I wanted to talk about on that cobia that I think you call it a tuna door or a side door.
Yeah.
And that is great. We talked about using heavier gear, reviving these fish. That was great to be able to revive big fish out of that door. I think we have some footage we can overlay right on that right now, but it made it so much easier to revive that fish, swim him, get water over his gills, and get him off rather than hanging over the deck or having the grips in his mouth. Like that was a very useful tool. So.
100%.
It's great for you and the fish because you're not like the blood's not rushing to your head while you're like over the gunnel trying to swim this fish. Make sure it's good. It's helpful for releasing or even bringing in the big fish too. Instead of it over the gunnel, having that, you can slide it right through there, get it unhooked in that 45 seconds. You can maybe even cut down 10 seconds off that.
One last thing I would like to touch on about, because we're talking about the cobia and how we kind of utilized it for our rips fishing and stuff this spring was the amount of space on it. Like it's what is it, 24 and a half foot
24.5 felt a lot bigger.
It felt a lot bigger. It felt like when you went out with four guys, you have to play that game where you're like ducking and casting over each other. There was always kind of ample casting room either on the bow or from the back. So you kind of always had an angle no matter where you were positioned on the boat to be able to cast into the rips and get good shots at the fish no matter what part of the boat you were on. So, but that was kind of one of the big highlights of my season. Obviously, the squid bite that we got on was also a big highlight of the season. That's kind of still going on a little bit up in Cape Cod Bay. I know, Jimmy, I think you got an email from somebody who said that they had squid, blowing out of the water 2 weeks ago or a week and a half ago, just off the outer Cape. So that's they're still around. It's they've definitely thinned out a little bit, but it seems like as long as there are small sand eels and that kind of Brit herring that they're talking about up in Maine as well, we've had some of that here around Cape Cod, and that's what those squid are feeding on. They came in from way offshore, and they're feeding on all this small bait. So as long as that sticks around, these squid are going to stick around, and that's going to kind of fuel the striper bite. And that's those squid have really filled in the gaps of where like the bunker are lacking. So that's been a nice bonus for us this season. But Johnny, would you like to go next to like what are some of your highlights of the season?
Yeah, sure. It was a different season for me. Last year was my first summer on the Cape, and I spent a lot of time trying to get to know the area I was fishing, get to know the Cape, and I wasted a lot of tides just to be there so I could say, was here for a full tide and kind of got to know how that spot works. And then this summer, I spent almost no time surf fishing the Cape. I was on the road all the time, and it was just kind of like the way I looked at it was, if you feel like you're not going to miss anything, then hit the road. That's kind of how Jimmy put it to me, and go where you know, and ended up doing well. I think my favorite trip was that trip I took up to the Plum Island area. I got into a big soft plastic and live eel bite on some pretty nice sized fish. It's my favorite way to fish. It's always been my favorite way to fish, is those big plastic eels. So that was a great bite for me.
Yeah, we talked about how you did quite a bit of travel this year. I did a lot of traveling last year, not so much this year, but that's one of the things that sometimes you don't want to leave your home waters to find fish elsewhere, but at the same time, it is nice to be able to travel the coast and you have buddies in different states, get on different bites with them. And Jimmy, that was something last year I remember you saying you wanted to do more of this year.
It is, yeah. And usually when I get into the summer, once we get past this point, my big thing is I want to find repeatable patterns. I want to find something that I can hit night after night after night and watch it develop and then fade. And that's tough to do if you're driving 2 hours to your spot. That's tough to do that multiple nights in a row. So I tend to be more of I'm staying within about an hour 15, about as far as I tend to go in the spring. And then once we get to the summer, then I'll spread my wings a little bit more. But yeah, I like to, my whole thing is I want to go every night is the goal, and watch things and see it all comes together. That's why when I miss a night or 2 nights, or in this most recent case, I missed 3 nights in a row, and I feel like I have no idea what's happening anymore. I love being out there, and just even if you're not catching anything, you see there's this bait, there's this happened. It's just, they're all little data points that you're using to gather. So I feel unmoored. I feel way less in tune if I'm driving. If I'm doing I'm going to make one trip 2 hours north.
It's just kind of a shot in the dark.
Yeah, as opposed to I'm going to hit the tides I know close to home and then see if I can find, maybe the mother lode's not there, but maybe there's a pack of good fish that's moving through at a certain part of the tide. That's what I tend to do, and you have to be comfortable with not catching fish. And I've become very comfortable with that.
There's many a still in the season.
I would say the workaround to that, and the reason I had any degree of success hitting the road as much as I did, is your network. You have to have a good network if you're going to be a road dog like that.
Yeah, but at the same time, as a surf fisherman, you don't want to have this massive network.
No,
you kind of want to have a tight knit network of guys that you trust, that are going to keep things kind of under wraps, but also share them with you when you kind of share information back and forth. So mutually beneficial relationships.
My closest surf fishing network, I'd say, is 4 guys. There's a 5th floater out there.
That's like a whole stadium worth.
What do you think's a good size? 3 people?
1.
Yourself.
Okay.
He doesn't share with anybody.
No. You have to have a couple confidants. But you keep the circle small. Here's the I guess the psychology side of it is if somebody's telling you something, you should also be able to tell them. And if you're looking to somebody for information, then you can't withhold it when you have something good. So in many ways, you can either be an open book with everybody, or you can not say much to anybody.
Even with my friends, I'm walking on eggshells sometimes, being very careful of what I do share and what I don't,
And you got to know the friend too that you're talking to.
Yeah, right.
Think back, what information has he given you in the past, and where did he get it, and all that sort of stuff.
It's way different from when you're in a boat, when you're boat fishing, because in the surf, you can there's a problem, major problems with crowds. With boats, it's just competition for the fish. In the surf, it could be access to the parking. You could lose that access if word gets out and people are disrespectful of the space. There could be one particular area that can fit 1 or 2 people, and if word gets out and there's 5 people there, then you're in a lesser spot.
Right.
So that's why overall surf fishermen tend to be more secretive than boat fishermen. And it's self-preservation. A lot of it is not wanting to lose access to places that is already getting more limited by the day.
Agreed. Well, we kind of got sidetracked there, but Liam, what are some of the highlights of your season?
I was eager to get out, so it was a lot of holdover fishing, and again, also no fish nights. We're trying to learn more, kind of what Johnny was saying. I'm still fairly new to the area, but I've been trying to learn Rhode Island the most. I've got family there. A lot of my fishing buddies are there too, so I was trying to get involved in that area. I started fishing at night, which I was telling Jimmy too early in the season. I'm like, this is scary as there was too many sounds, everything. I'm looking over.
We had our fair share of those.
Yeah,
we did.
And funny enough, so I know Matt and Johnny, you talked about your wildlife
Fisher cats and all sorts of weird stuff. Yeah.
I had one last week that I would like to share.
We haven't had one in a few weeks.
I was surf fishing. I had just gotten back from a trip. I missed the squid blitz. I was eager to get out. I went fishing from the surf, and I got a quick bump on a Z-Man Hero Z, but I had a stride with me that I hadn't fished yet. I was really excited about it. So I'm like, you know what? I know I just got a bump on this, but maybe the stride will call them in. I'm fishing it, and all of a sudden I see like a wake behind him. Like, there he is. So I'm like waiting. And then all of a sudden I'm looking closer at it, and I see this brown round head around the stride bait. Yep. A seal followed the glide bait 20 feet to me before I'm sprinting out onto the beach and reeling in behind me as I'm going.
It's ominous when you see that giant wake, like just following your bait in like that, whether you have a fish on it or not.
Well, he had an expensive glide bait.
Yeah,
that's true.
I was worried about the money I spent, but no, my favorite time out so far was with Johnny and going to Block Island and having quite a good morning. Definitely still getting used to that, comfortable with it. But
that was fun. That was the first bite I had got on. That was glide baits were like, that was the key to getting a bite. I caught fish on glide baits where they're eating anything, and it's just fun when you catch them. But that was the first bite where like you needed a glide or a dock to get a bite.
Yes, and it was funny because we did spend we spent a lot of money on 24 eels because we thought, because it was to the year, it was the same time that we went out for angling adventures. And one of the things that stuck with me was Jimmy said, why didn't I buy 24 eels? And that was in the back of my head preparing for this trip. So I'm like, all right, we're buying 24 eels, getting ready for that.
I drove to Brewster to buy jig heads for eels.
Yeah, I was, trying to ask and figure out information from, bait shops and everything like that. And to get out and have success for that first time of going out, before going out on boats, I'm with my friends that have been doing this for years. They kind of understand or know what's going on. I'm, still like only 3 years truly like living in Massachusetts. So and in the same way that Johnny was talking about trying to figure out some of his like local striper spots here on Cape, you're trying to figure out like some of your spots that you can reliably hit from your boat now. Exactly, and and still from the surf as well, because I know being here in Falmouth, like I'm not going to be able to go over there every day or anything like that. My weather windows are going to be limited.
Well, Jimmy, you've had some time to think now. What were some of the highlights of your season?
Well, one of my goals this season was to spend more time fishing during the day with glide baits, and I did that, and I caught a couple real nice fish doing that, beyond the canal blitzes, but actually making an effort to go out and fishing in the daylight. And that's a challenge for me, not because I'm used to fishing at night, but because of the work and family. So I carved out some more time, walked some beaches, fished some bays and things during the day, looking for better sized bass with big plugs, and did okay. I had dropped one nice one, had one nice one, caught a couple other fish in between, and they're really beautiful fish when you catch them in the daylight.
They are.
They look a little bigger than when you catch them at night too. It's nice. It's nice to get out there under the sun for a change. So I did more of that this year, and I'm looking forward to doing some more through the rest of the year, even though that may be less productive as we get into the summer. Where it gets warmer, bass settle into their summer patterns, and they become largely nocturnal. As they won't feed as much during the day, at least not in close to shore.
Yeah,
but it's still worth a shot. I mean, watching them track the glide bait, seeing the swirl behind it, and then knowing you have to do something to get them to fully commit. Right. That's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and you get to see the bass react in real time to kind of your change in the retrieve or whatever pattern you were using. And so we've talked a little bit about highlights of our season. What are some of the things you guys are looking forward to for the rest of the season, like in the summer months or even going into like late summer, early fall?
Just keep exploring.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still, I feel like a lot of this spring was anticipation for me. I'm like, it's going to happen at some point. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh shoot, I'm almost going to miss it or something like that. Or I'm like, oh, it's already, now it's, end of June. I still feel like, May, it's in my head, it feels like it's still that like May time frame.
Yeah, it does.
But
it is so not.
I know,
very not at all.
It's flown by. But yeah, I would say one of the things that I am trying to do more of this summer and going into like late summer, early fall is do a bit of traveling. So come July, we'll have run 2 stories in the magazine about fishing for stripers in Canada. Yes. I don't see myself getting to Canada this year, but maybe next year, 2 years from now, when I have a little bit more time to plan that kind of a road trip. But definitely hoping to get up to Maine and do some of the summer fishing up there because it just seems like such a. I did it twice last year, and one of those times it was great. But maybe travel to Rhode Island a little bit this summer. It's something I did a couple times this spring, and then definitely Long Island during the fall run. I like to go down and visit family and stuff like that. So kind of mapping out. I use a couple weeks in the summer to like map out what the rest of my striper season will look like, and I'm hoping to do a little bit more traveling, which is like we said, Jimmy. I know it's one of the things you wanted to do a little bit more of. So still lots to look forward to. But anybody have any final thoughts or observations about the spring migration this year? We know it was a great year for big fish. I'm sure there were many folks who beat their PBs. I think we'll see some seriously large fish caught this fall with a summer of feeding under their belts as well.
That's what I'm looking for.
Can I still share my goals?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, only Matt got to share his. Well, I don't know if that's, it's your show, but
okay,
hopes and dreams
go
too.
right ahead.
One of my big things for let's say it's midsummer, end of June into early July. The fish I used to catch in this time frame have shifted their pattern. So I used to have a pretty good bead on a nice body of fish that would move through, Cape Cod, south coast of Massachusetts this time of year. And since the brown sharks have gotten real abundant over the last 5 years, I've kind of lost track of those. Like they've shifted their pattern. I would love to figure out what they're doing now. Like get back. I'm sure they're still swimming through the area, but with so many sharks around, they must be doing something different.
Yeah.
And I've talked to people who've experienced this in Connecticut, in Rhode Island, and tried to glean some information on when the sharks move in, the bass start doing this instead, and it's not where you'd expect to find them. So I want to start trying to apply that. Again, though, that's like get comfortable with some fishless nights because you're exploring as opposed to the reports from further north could be very good, and I'm traveling 40 minutes in the opposite direction of we're catching 20 fish a night and they're all 20 pounds and up. So, but that's part of, to me, that's part of what I like about surf fishing is like finding a little pattern. I love those, like just getting on a random big pile of fish and catching a ton of them. But I also like the nights where you're working hard and you get 2 or 3, but they're good ones.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think a lot of people like to do in the summer is, you kind of, like you said, Jimmy, you see fish starting to transition into these different patterns and stuff like that. And something like a live eel is much more likely to get bit than maybe, a swimming plug or a metal lip or something for that to that end. But one of the problems, going off of what you said about sharks, is just you're going to run into, especially here on Cape Cod, you start throwing eels from the beaches or some of the places that you think that there will be stripers, and you're getting interference from sharks, and that's not exactly fun to do when you're on a rock or on a jetty. No. So
one goal I kind of have for this, call it midsummer period before the fall run starts, is as a whole, I've been trying to really tighten up and narrow down my surf bag, just bring less and less plugs. And one plug I have to get better at with is the needlefish, even though it's as simple as it can be. I finally got into a good needlefish bite late last week in an area where there's no sharks, so that's a big part of it as well. Yep. So I'm really going to spend some time dialing in the needlefish because I think there are a lot of nuances that you can dial in with that plug, as simple as it is. And like I said, I just want to have a smaller bag and just have a few solid plugs that I'm really good at come the fall.
Totally. And I think that the needlefish, like if we do see some fish kind of move onto the outer beaches, whether it be the outer Cape, the backside, it could be up in Cape Cod Bay. I think anywhere that, casting distance is a factor where you want to get out over those outer bars, like the needlefish is one of those plugs you just have to have in your bag. And not just one, you want to have multiple variations, different sizes, sink rates, things like that, to kind of be able to, really dial in that bite a little bit. So, Liam, do you have any goals for the rest of the season?
I like the idea of, trying to dial in what I have because fishing from the boat, there was one instance where we were fishing and we saw a ton of fish milling around, and I emptied out my tackle box and literally would take 2 or 3 casts with a lure and then take it off, throw something else on, and then throw it out, trying to figure it out. I need to stop and work something that I have confidence in. So I do like that idea, but yeah, just exploring and figuring out new and different patterns and just taking in the information that I see each day or night. And I definitely need to, I don't live on Cape, and I need to stop traveling a little bit more and maybe like try to dial in. Like I honestly really haven't fished really much around where I live too much. Yeah. And, it would be easier on the gas money and
definitely,
beneficial, I think, for just an easy trip.
There's something to be said for learning your home waters inside and out, because you can keep going there night after night, and you can really get an idea of how it fishes, how it reacts, how it looks on all series of tides, on the conditions. I'm always a big advocate for that. Like, you can always travel to the hot spots, but it'll reward you in the end if you go and you have an intimate knowledge of the waters close to your home. And that could be, I mean, when I spent the summers down in South Jersey, yeah, dude, knowing them was the high water mark in midsummer was going to be a 30-inch fish, but man, you felt great to catch it. Like, I learned from a lot of the old timers down there. Doc Adams was one of the, he's one of the late legends down in Ocean City, New Jersey, and he would just take his bike down the Ocean City boardwalk, hit all these little pipes and jetties, and with a popper, and dead of summer when nobody's even thinking about stripers, he's catching 30-inch fish from the surf, which in terms of what guys talk about for trophies, pretty meager. But when that's what you have there, and when you know that, like, this is the tide and this is when I need to be there, there's something to that too. And then in the fall, doing that same pattern, knowing that they're 40-inch fish. Yeah.
I'm glad we all have kind of some different goals. Liam, it's interesting that, like, I'm looking to travel more, and you're looking to kind of like hone in your local waters. And
I'm just looking to get boat invites.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, make some friends with boat fishermen. Yeah. But it's like we said, it's getting into the summer months. There's still some fish movement happening to the north of us. I would say anywhere from like the North Shore of Massachusetts up to Maine, you're going to see waves of migratory fish kind of trickling in, and then they're going to be setting up into their summer patterns. And as we heard from Lou Tirado, there's not a whole lot of fish that have dropped out of the rivers yet, because it's been, like it was across the rest of the coast, just a banner year for alewives and river herring up there. So for everybody else, where the water's getting a little warmer, maybe south of Cape Cod, around Cape Cod, there's still plenty of big fish around. Treat those big fish with a little extra care this summer. Keep them wet as best you can. Revive them. We talked about how we spent a little extra time reviving our fish with the advantage of the tuna door on the Cobia 245. And let's all pray for some good news this fall when Maryland releases their young of year index, because it was a longer spawn. I got to fish the Hudson a little bit, hoping for a good spawn there after what we saw up there this spring. So yeah, I mean, there's still a lot to look forward to, and hopefully it'll be a good summer for everybody on the northern New England area. It seems like there's still a lot of good to come up there. With that, I want to give a big thanks to our friends over at Canyon Runner for providing us with weekly insight into our water temperatures each week, and helping us forecast where and when the fishing might really pop off. It's still a good time to sign up for the Striper Cup. You got it's a 20-week catch and release based striped bass fishing tournament. It began on May 1st, but you can sign up until I think early September. So there's still plenty of time to sign up for that. Visit stripercup.com for more information on that front, and I would say follow along for more migration updates, but we're transitioning away from the migration map and into offshore fishing report season. So if you're interested in tuna fishing, the offshore scene in general, check back here on Wednesdays for Jimmy Fee and Anthony DeCicci to be given offshore reports. And thanks for tuning in to our Striper Migration reports all season long, everybody.